Meeting of the Shelton City Council to order for May 21st. Will we all please rise for the pledge? Okay, Councilmember Schmidt is away on his day job overnight, during the week, so I'd like to excuse him tonight. So,
I move to excuse
okay,
Councilman Smith.
Second.
okay, is all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we excuse Councilmember Schmidt. Look forward to him at our next meeting. So Donna, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Councilmember Dorsey,
Present.
Councilmember Inesco,
Here.
Councilmember Krantz,
Here.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Here.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Any changes to the agenda? I have one question on the consent agenda for Jeff. The only change to the lease is the legal description. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The drawing that you saw at your last council meeting with the red line on it, if you remember that, that's the only change.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no changes to the agenda, I'll call for council reports. Councilmember Dorsey.
All right. Aside from my normal staff briefings with Jeff Knighton, we had the YMCA sign raising today, which was kind of exciting to see that finally get started. Had my Mason Transit Authority meeting today also. Tomorrow, I think it is tomorrow, we're gonna attend the Public Works Barbecue, or at least I am. And then I'm gonna be gone for a few days, and I'll be back for the parade on the 1st.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nisco.
Besides our daily briefings and meetings, I attended a lodging tax advisory committee meeting, and I have a housing behavioral health advisory board meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cron.
Well, I've had a few more of these staff briefings, because every time I have a question, I run over to Jeff's office and say, do you have a minute? And so we've had several conversations this week, and it's all good because, there's just things that if you don't understand, we have a wonderful city manager to help kind of guide us through some of these things because of his past experience. And so, anyway, some issues came up, and so it was really good to have a few one-on-ones there and answer a few questions that I had during the week. I'm going to go to that Public Works Barbecue, and also on Thursday, I think Public Works is going to be loading some trucks up, and I plan to attend the one on 7th and Railroad for an hour or so on Thursday. So that completes my report.
Okay, thank you. I also attended the LTAC meeting with Councilmember Nisco. We had an expanded presence, both our members and people who participated for input to the committee, and I appreciate everyone who came out that day. I will be participating in the Memorial Day ceremony this weekend at the graveyard. Forest Festival is actually before our next meeting. It's early this year, so we'll be participating in Forest Festival, and we'll be attending a Crossroads board meeting this Friday, or next Friday, excuse me. Deputy Mayor?
In addition to what's already been mentioned, I attended the Peninsula Regional Transportation Project Organization meeting last Friday, and we'll be seeing the ILA from them under today's business agenda.
Well, I've had kind of a busy couple weeks. On Tuesday the 7th, I took off and went to the LEFT board, which is Law Enforcement Officers and Firefighters, and we managed their medical bills. So we had some good conference discussions, and I was there, came back on Friday, had a briefing with our city manager. Today I went to the YMCA sign raising, and it was pretty exciting. And I'll be at the Public Works Barbecue tomorrow, and then I have a special meeting of the Mason County Board of Health tomorrow afternoon. I'll be helping up in Mountain View at the OCCU on Thursday for an hour, filling the truck, and I will be attending Dr. Yu. She's our Mason County doctor county doctor, and she's retiring. So her celebration is the 29th here at the Civic Center, if you can make it, to say goodbye to her. And I will be attending the memorial service program, I guess, what do they call it, at the cemetery? I will be doing that also.
Okay.
Yep, and
Thank
that's
you.
my weeks.
Thank you, Councilmember McDowell. Okay, now's the time for general public comment for things that are not on the agenda. We ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes. When you step up to the podium, please identify yourself and whether you live within the city of Shelton. And if you haven't already done so, give a card to Donna so we can keep a record of who speaks. And Donna?
We have Giselle Waterhouse.
Wrangle her. Hi, I'm Giselle Waterhouse. I live at 2035 Stevens Street. This is concerning a house on our same block, 2028 Stevens Street. We were here, I believe, 7 months ago to discuss a little bit of what's going on. It's continued to get worse. We have 12 children that live on our one block alone. And across the street from this house, there's 3 houses directly facing it with most of those children. The kids cannot go out and play. They cannot walk to school without having people walking around without their clothes on, half-dressed, high, needles, condoms in the street. There's drug activity 24/7, people coming out of the woods to this property, going into the woods, driving in and out. It's become very unsafe for the normal citizens to live in this block. I do understand the gentleman that owns the house owns it. He has guests. His guests have turned into camping in their cars, sleeping on the back porch. It's just steamrolling. I do know the police officers come when called, when they can, because there's a lot going on in the neighborhood and in the city of Shelton. This house is a known drug house. It is known for heroin, meth, prostitution, you name it, comes out of there and goes straight downtown here and all over this city and goes straight back up to that house. You see it if you live in the neighborhood. You see it when you go to the grocery store. I belong to the 40 and 8. They come in and try to change their $20 bills some of the times. I'm the president of the La Femmes. I care about my community. Also, I have an 86-year-old mother. My father died 3 years ago. The end of his life, he had dementia, and he had to live with that coming into his neighborhood. That was their forever home that they bought here in Mason County. My father helped bring the casinos into this county. He was a big, huge liquor representative for Washington State, Alaska Distributors. He helped a lot of businesses. My mother was the head of rally racing. They brought that here to Mason County, the Olympus rally. I used to be a race car driver until I broke my back. We care about this community. We put a lot in this community. All my children live in this community. I have one at Fort Bragg right now, but he still owns a house and pays taxes. What we've come to in the neighborhood is, if we call, is anything going to happen? No, it's not happening. The catch and release program does not work. They look at us like, go ahead and call. Need I say more?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure Chief Moody's aware of the house. Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
That's all we have, Mr. Mayor.
we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
So moved.
I second it.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as published. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, next, we have Deputy Mayor is going to read proclamation declaring the week of May 19th through 25th as National Public Works Week.
City of Shelton proclamation. Whereas the American Public Works Association has declared the week of May 19th through 25, 2019 as National Public Works Week and has set the theme of It Starts Here. And whereas Public Works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Shelton. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the state of Washington to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the American Public Works Association has celebrated the annual National Public Works Week since 1960, now therefore the City Council of the City of Shelton, Washington, in conjunction with the American Public Works Association, does hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through 25, 2019 as Public Works Week, and calls upon citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Signed this 21st day of May, 2019.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any comments on that? Okay. Turn it over to Public Works Director Craig Gregory, who, in kind of combination with this, is going to present the award for Public Works Employee of the Year.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I am honored tonight to introduce Donnie Henson as the 2019 Public Works Employee of the Year for the City of Shelton. Donnie started his career with the city almost 14 years ago, 12 of those in the Solid Waste Department. Over 2 years ago, the Solid Waste Department was privatized. Donnie has expanded his talents as a public works operator since that point. Donnie is an outstanding employee who on a daily basis goes above and beyond his duties and consistently exceeds the performance standards for his position. He willingly accepts any and all challenges, from learning new equipment to public works projects. He demonstrates extraordinary leadership abilities and displays outstanding customer service qualities. Donnie is a vital member of the Public Works Department and has demonstrated excellent work ethic and a level of integrity that is unmatched. I give you Donnie Henson, the Public Works Employee of the Year for 2019. Andy went with the family, maybe? Yeah, absolutely. Does it have?
Thank you very much.
Right on.
There you go, guys.
This is not about me. It's about the whole team we have down there. We all work together very well, and if it wasn't for a group of guys down there that I can lean on and make me better as a person and as an operator, it's just a great group of guys to work with. It starts right here with this guy. He's taught me a lot. Really respect him. So, like I say, it's just a great place to work, and I'm very proud to work for the city of Shelton.
Okay. Thank you, Donnie.
Donnie,
hold on a second.
hold on. Donnie was my garbage man for many years down at the end of Fifth Street. And I remember, I don't know if you remembered or not, but you emptied the garbage can one day. I was out in the yard and a little piece of garbage fell out. And I went to pick it up and you said, no, let me. And you got out and you took that piece of garbage and you threw it in the truck and you said, have a good day.
That's just.
He was, I miss you a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome very much. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Donnie.
Right on, man.
Okay. Next on the agenda, Finance Director Aaron B. Miller is here to give us a first quarter budget update.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Aaron B. Miller with the Finance Department. I'm going to try to find a spot there. Perfect. I am here. I guess they didn't know I was presenting, so they. Here to present the first quarter financial report and a couple of quick tidbits about especially the first quarter financials. It's great to determine if there's anything that's happened that is big that we need to be worried about. It's not great for forecasting. It's early on. It's only 3 months of the year. A lot of the big expenses from construction activities and all of those types of things haven't even really begun yet in the first quarter. So it really is just a measure of where we are. This is absolutely a work in progress. So this is just kind of our first go round at it. It's kind of like taking Jell-O and throwing it at the wall. We're going to see what sticks. We're really interested in hearing feedback from council as well as department directors about what works, what doesn't work. We've already got a few things that we'd like to change moving forward, but at least it gives us a platform to start the conversation. So going to start, I think. Going to start with our citywide cash and investments, and you can see in the chart here, this is a 5-quarter view of how much money we have in the bank or in investments. This is citywide, and you can see we've moved those into color so you can see how much is in a bank account. The LGIP is a local government investment pool. And then we have some other securities. The U.S. Bank Securities, which is about a $300,000 security, it's a Freddie Mac security, and it matures in April of 2020 at about 2.5% interest, so we'll have a chance to roll those over. That is something we want to start looking at, is starting to do a little bit more investing, starting to try to what's called laddering, so that as investments roll off, they can be reinvested, but keeping certainly safety, liquidity, and yield in mind for all of those things.
Aaron, quick question on that. The money market, is that, we had some bank fees, quite a significant bank fees, and is that the funds that we moved into the local investment?
Sorry, those bank fees are for KeyBank that they assess us each year. And so moving them back investments into the LGIP with the bulk of the money market money, it helps offset those fees.
Okay.
By what we earn for interest and culture.
Okay, thanks.
The next slide we have is our quarter one total cash and investments by fund. So as you can see, we have about nearly $14 million in cash and investments. And the chart on the graph on the left-hand side shows how much by percent, how much of those are in each of those funds. It's important to keep in mind that when we talk about cash, we literally are just talking about money in the bank. It's like the bank account at home. It doesn't mean fund balance. There aren't other assets involved in here, and there aren't liabilities that we're waiting to be paid. It's a snapshot in time of how much money we have. And again, this one is by fund. Want to move to general fund revenues. Whenever we show a comparative revenue such as this, you want to take a breath because it can look bad and it can look overly optimistic. The question that we have is anything here not planned for? Is there a problem that we didn't realize that was out there? And in our case, luckily, no. All of these variances can be explained. Which we show on this next chart here. These are the variances from that previous chart that are over $50,000 or 5% from where we thought they should be. So in the charges for services, you can see that we're under 2018 by about $435,000. Significantly, in the first quarter, we did not do our indirect cost transfers, and there was a law enforcement services receipt transfer, and that's roughly, $415,000 of that total variance. So those have been done now. Were done in the second quarter, and so you should see that number come more in line with expectations. Intergovernmental, this is one of those where we're comparing 2018 to 2019. but it's planned to be different. The council adopted a street fund as a special revenue fund last year when they adopted the 2019 budget. And so some of those monies that used to go into the general fund now go into the street fund. They're going there, but it's a reduction in the general fund. So again, this was a planned decrease here. And licenses and permits are up a little bit due to building activity and building permits.
Aaron, question on the indirect costs. That'll be done quarterly?
It's going to be done at least quarterly. We'd like to move it to monthly. We just engaged a firm to help us with our indirect cost plan, and that's now finished. And so we were waiting until that piece got done so that we could move the appropriate amount over. But yeah, we'll do that at least quarterly.
Okay, so I'm anticipating end of June. The second quarter will be actually done in July then. Is that?
No, we would try to do it in June, at
You would
the
have
end
to
of
book it
June,
in
so
June.
that when we do the second
Okay.
quarter report, it would show
Okay.
as part of that.
Thank you.
This chart here just demonstrates, it's really for demonstration purposes only. Revenues don't roll in perfectly, 25% every quarter. They roll in different stages, but we just want to demonstrate what the differences are between where we would think we would be at 25% and where they actually are. The big variances here in goods and charges for services, the goods and services, intergovernmental and licenses and permits. We've just talked about those variances on the last chart. This comparative chart doesn't have its lead lines. I apologize for that. What we're trying to show here, and this is one of those that we need to kind of work on, is on the left-hand side, you can see how we budget the revenues by source. And on the right-hand side is how we've collected, the mix of those revenues to date. Looking at the taxes, which is the big orangey one, we budgeted for about 65% of our general fund revenues to come from taxes. Through the first quarter, it's about 76%. As the year goes on, as we make those transfers that we haven't done, and more taxes and more revenues come in, hopefully that will smooth and we'll see this be a little bit more in line with budget expectations. These are, I think, handy comparative charts because they show over the last 3 years, it's the same point in time of March 2017, which is the orange, 18, which is bluish gray, and 19, which is the red. And you can see, again, charges for services, we've talked about that. It's the indirect costs that were charged in the second quarter. But taxes are coming in right about where you would think they would be year over year. Then we have fines and forfeitures, intergovernmental, which we talked about, licenses and permits, and so on and so forth. So this is a handy chart which would show where we are out of bounds from previous years. On the general fund expenditure side, this chart demonstrates where the expenses are, and you can see the red hashed line is 25%. When it comes to general fund expenditures, generally, that's going to be more in line with about 25% would be expended in the first quarter and so on and so forth. Doesn't always work out. There's a million reasons for that. Vacancies, contracts, and other types of things, but it gives you a little bit of a view here of where we are. On the right-hand side is the dollar values of what the left-hand chart shows. There are two that are a little bit askew, so we want to talk about that, and there was mentioned that it might be a good idea in the future if the parts that are over the 25% be kind of in a different color. Happy to do that if I have the skill set. I don't know if I do, but if I do, we'll get that done. Human resources. In the beginning of each year, we pay our Washington City's Insurance Authority annual payment for liability and property insurance. So that's already gone out the door. That's what's driving that budget up over the 25% mark. And the non-departmental includes about $790,000 of transfers that are going to be in the budget adjustment that Sandy presents here in just a little bit, which were planned. They just didn't get into the budget, but that's moving dollars for the Transportation Benefit District out of the general fund and into the street fund where it does the job it's supposed to be doing. So again, explainable reasons that those are different or higher than we might anticipate at 25% of the year.
Aaron,
Yeah.
anybody else have questions?
Nope.
I did have a question, so, but do you want me to ask mine?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, you had one too, right?
Yes, I did.
So let's go back just to, and these pages aren't numbered, but I did like the way this is all laid out. I was telling our city manager how, who come up with this is really nice. I mean, this is like second grade. If you can't read this, you know, I mean, even though none of the numbers, obviously you need a rocket scientist's brain to figure out what these numbers mean. But one quick question here on a couple pages back. On this one right here, the lowest figure there is legal, and I was wondering, is our legal cost less now this year than last year? Is there a reason?
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. We can look into that to see
You
where
get a
we are.
lawyer
One of the
to do
things, one of the things that we should have done, which we didn't do, is do the same type of comparison over the 3 previous years, and that's going to be one of the charts that gets added to the next report.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
So, anyway, well, that's good news. Something's well.
Great.
Aaron, quick question on the example of the insurance assessment. That's a one-time payment.
Yes.
And we assume we budgeted over the year.
Oh, yeah, well, it is
Or-
budgeted. It's absolutely budgeted. It's just that the expense doesn't go out on a monthly process. It goes all out all at once. So it's about $100,000 that's budgeted, it's planned for. It's just that that expense all hits in the first quarter.
I'm just wondering, is that, since we're on cash basis, in the future, would we budget that type of expense as a one-time shot as it's paid? In reality, or would we continue to smooth it over the year?
We do show it as it's paid. I mean, we budget $100,000, whether it's paid in November or whether it's paid in February. When that goes out the door, we just show it as cash out the door, as an expense that hits. So we show that in the first quarter, if I'm catching your point.
Yeah, hey, is it a timing issue? Just
Yeah,
where the
I-
130
We don't
is?
budget monthly.
Right.
We only
Right.
budget annually, so we budget the 100,000 in the budget, and it looks like it's a whole year, but as Aaron said, it goes all out, so it just skews the results. By next quarter, then the amount spent will come down, and third quarter it'll come down again. So if we had budgeted monthly, then we could budget that 100,000 all in the first quarter or second month or something like that, but we don't budget monthly, it's just,
Your
it makes
alloc,
it seem to be spread out through the year, and then when the actuals come and hit all at one time, it skews the results.
so the budget for, say, January, 1 month would have 1/12 of that in, or not? Or
We
you
don't budget.
We don't budget monthly.
you don't budget month?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's a
that answers
different
that question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The packets include a couple of slides that I'm going to just skip over on functional area. It's important that we want to look at this, but I think these were done a little bit too quickly. They're not quite ready for prime time, so I'm just going to wipe those off. It's important that we start to look at numbers more than just what department does what, but what's the function that these dollars are funding? And so this was a little bit too early, so I apologize for that.
Is that a spaceship?
It's a Ghostbuster.
I mean, I like it. Okay.
I went to Donna and I said, I want to pull a couple, and she said, well, it's too late, so we had that. Last general fund slide, general fund budget and Q1 actuals by account type. On the left-hand side, the pie chart is how our expenses are budgeted by account type, and then the right-hand side, it also shows the budget and as well as where we are through Q1. And so as you will probably, is normal for most governments and organizations, about 55% of our general fund budget is salaries and benefits. And then we come up with the service charges, which comes in about 30. Those are the professional service, contracts, utility costs, those types of things. Capital and debt, it's a smaller number in the general fund. And then supplies and those types of things are also a little bit smaller. So to date, we've spent about 35% of our first quarter actuals are in salaries and about 14% are in benefits. So we're not too far off from kind of how we budget, and that makes sense. And they're a little bit lower. There's going to be reasons for that. When we budget, might be vacancies, so those monies haven't gone out, and so on and so forth. But wanted to give this view as well. So looking at our other funds, same, excuse me. There we go. Same presentation. This is revenue outside of the general fund, so it shows the street fund, tourism fund. Again, we have the hashed line to show where 25% would be, and again, things just don't operate perfectly as a 25% every quarter. We will go into why some of these are that way, and we've already talked about some of them. Same view for expenses outside of the general fund and where they are. And in order to save some slides and save some time, we've lumped categories. And one that isn't a great lumping together, but we did it, is we've combined the special revenue funds, the bond fund, and the capital fund onto one chart. And as you can see, the street fund shows a large variance, and the reason behind that, of course, this is for revenues, is last year the street fund was in the general fund. This year the street fund is a special revenue fund, so we're showing 0 the previous year and all of those revenues this year. It includes the planned transfers that we've talked about of the transportation and benefit district funds from the general fund, and then also some additional working capital. And so excluding those transfers in, the street revenue through Q1 is 18% above where they were in 2018 in the general fund, significantly due to about $35,000 increase in the transportation benefit district sales tax. The other fund that we wanted to highlight here in terms of revenue is the capital improvement fund. You can see it's well over where we were last year, and that's because it includes the TIB grant of about $745,000 that came in, as well as the WASDOT grant for the Downtown Connector project. The TIB was budgeted, but the WASDOT we thought we were going to get last year. Cash basis, it came in this year, the cash hits this year, so we're showing it as this year's budget. We tried to show here a little demonstration between the account types of revenue and where they're coming in, and you can see that there's significant revenue in the intergovernmental. That's the 2 grants that we just talked about, the WASDOT and the TIB grant, and there's also a significant large percentage in miscellaneous, and this is where percentages can absolutely be misleading. It looks like we're just killing it in miscellaneous, and we are. The difference is we budgeted about $3,000 for interest, and we've got about $3,300. So it's not a huge dollar amount coming in. It's just the way that it happens when you're showing things by percentage. And on the right-hand side, the graph tries to break that up graphically of how we budgeted those funds to come in. Same grouping of funds, this time on the expense side. Street fund, salary and benefits. But the street fund is well under from a percentage. But what's important to note here is that salary and benefits are about 43% of budget through the first quarter, and that's due to the snow activities that happened. We are going to be working with Craig and his team to refine where we are with that. It's not in the supplement, in the budget adjustment that you'll see today. It will be in the next one. And then the transfer out to capital, indirect and rentals, we're not done. That's a big number, 1.47 million, but the transfer out to capital is 1.1, 1.2 of that. So that's money, street money that's going to go toward capital purposes. And then they'll start spending their money in the summertime. Tourism
City Council meeting
includes 2 payments that were from 2018. Again, cash base. They came in 2019. We pay them, and so we show that as an expense in 2019. And capital improvement really is just timings on projects and when payments come in, or when payments go out, I should say. This is expense. Same graph here, trying to demonstrate where the salaries and wages are, benefits, and all the other expenditure account types as compared to 25%. And then you have the graph on the pie chart or donut chart on the right-hand side showing how those numbers were budgeted. Moving on then, the next grouping are enterprise funds. These go well together. Our water, sewer, solid waste, and storm drainage funds. Same presentation. Water utility charges are down by about $14,000. Interest earnings of $9,000. These are revenues, I should say, are up. In general, facility charge hookups of about 10. That explains about the $40,000 variance or increase in the water. Sewer, there was a Region 1 revenues of about $147,000, and then the state grants that we've talked about a little bit, and utility charges, and then solid waste. The DOE grant for landfill was received in 2018. We haven't got that in 2019, but we have budgeted $600,000 for that. And I should say that the sewer grant money was for the Basin 3 project. Oh, sorry. Again, same charts as last time, kind of showing where those monies are coming from, intergovernmental revenues. That's where we get that state money that comes in mostly, and so that shows all of those increases there. And then you can see that charges for goods and services is how, in the enterprise, of course, enterprises that run like a business, a governmental business, and charges for services is where the revenue sources come in for those funds. Expenditure for the enterprise funds. You can see they're a little under in some cases, in all cases from previous years. Transfer out, again, the indirect costs transfer outs are not in this, so that's going to run, that theme is going to run through these. And there's some other variances as well. Did want to just make mention of the solid waste. 2018 is comprised mostly of repairs and maintenance costs for alleys, and then we did have a PERS excess compensation correction that came in this year. Again, trying to show on a account type for the expenses for those funds on the left-hand side there, and then on the right-hand side is the donut shape for how those funds were budgeted for the city's enterprise funds. Internal service funds, last grouping of funds that we have. From a revenue perspective, the general fund transfers for payroll benefits for retired police officers has taken place now. It wasn't done the first quarter again. And then the equipment rentals are also being done in the second quarter. And those revenues are things for like fuel sales, vehicle repairs, service and maintenance charges and stuff like that. Not the most dynamic picture you'll ever see, but miscellaneous revenue is, again, that's misleading. We budgeted $400 for interest revenue, and we got $413. So it looks like we're killing it. It's $13 over in the first quarter, and then you can see the chart on the other side. Last bit of information, the expenditure side. Reason that we're a little bit lower in the payroll benefits is long-term care payments through Q1 are just a little bit less than they were in 2018. And then the significant variance in the equipment rental is indirect charges again. And again, the last view of kind of how things roll out from a account perspective and from a budget perspective for those accounts. And that is the end of the first quarter report. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, I don't remember us in the past years having these reports quarterly. So I know none of you were there either, so who do I look to? I think we went over this once a year. I mean, I don't remember having, are we planning to have a little budget quarterly report every quarter? Is that what we're planning to do?
Yeah, best practice would be that we report to the board, to the council, at least quarterly on the status of the financials, but we're happy to.
So does anybody remember? I mean, we didn't do this quarterly. I'm trying to find somebody as old as me in this. I mean, who would, we didn't do these quarterly, once a year. I mean, you're as old as I mean, you've been here.
So what are you saying?
Your longevity
You've
speaks for
been here
itself,
as
is what he
long
meant
as
to
I
say.
have. I mean, a lot of new people
I don't
here.
remember.
I don't remember having a budget report quarterly, it was once a year, you know, so.
And this is something that we discussed as a
Yeah.
council
Yeah.
early on, and to see
Oh,
this
yeah.
now coming to fruition.
Oh, I'm not
Right.
against.
No,
it.
absolutely,
No,
but
I'm
it's nice to
I'm
see
just
that
kind
coming
of
to
saying-
fruition now.
Yeah, saying
Yeah.
this might be, this is maybe, yeah, it's good news,
This is
so,
good.
that's all, thank you.
Just one comment. The graphs that were best for me were the 3-year history ones. The one-
Yeah.
And my only comment would be, it'd be on the taxes, it'd be nice to split the different types of taxes, because each tax kind of tells you a different story, whether it's utility tax, sales tax, or property tax.
Yeah.
But that was very useful. So thank you, Aaron.
That's great. Yeah, we'll take that advice. Like I said, this is kind of the first volley out there, and we'll make some improvements from there. And I think that's a great idea to break those out.
Anything else for Aaron? You don't know how much I thank you very much.
Thank
Bill.
you.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's been a long time coming, this
Yes.
Deputy Mayor said, so thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next, or I guess we'll start with our business agenda. Any comments for the business?
No, I don't
Right.
have any, sir.
First item, financial analyst Cindy Hines is going to speak to us about first quarter budget amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. So it's already May. We're calling these the first quarter adjustments. They are basically the first adjustments of the year to our 2019 adopted budget. It is, as Aaron used the term, best practice to bring forward to council's adjustments during the year to recognize unbudgeted grant revenue for new grant revenue that has come forward, housekeeping items such as adjusting your beginning fund balances to what they were from the previous year. In this first quarter, we do carryovers, so projects that were budgeted for 2018 weren't completed, or the items were not paid for in 2018 and rolling over, so we're carrying over that budget. Also, for this adjustment, we're recognizing some cost of living adjustments for personnel for bargaining units that didn't close until after the budget was adopted in December. So we're recognizing, and that was for 2 of our unions, for Public Works and for the finance group. And then just, there's always probably some corrections that come up during the year where things that maybe weren't budgeted, or increases that happen based on adjusted rates or contracts. And so it's just prudent to bring forward those to council so that the budget stays up to date throughout the year. And when Aaron's doing his quarterly adjustments, you're not looking at actuals compared to a budget that is out of balance. So I just wanted to kind of walk through some of the adjustments. General fund has the largest amount of adjustments for the year. Some of these adjustments are one-time in nature, such as carryovers, where we're just bringing budget over from 2018 into 19, and that's a one-time item, versus ongoing adjustments, which would be things like the personnel changes, where we're increasing the budgets for salary and benefits related to contract adjustments or new hires. From the revenue side for the general fund, you'll see an adjustment on the revenue for each fund that is an adjustment to the beginning fund balance. So when we are budgeting in the fall, we estimate how much revenue and expenditures will come in for that particular fund, and that gives us an estimated beginning fund balance to budget from. Once we close out the year, and Terry has done her magic to close out the year, we end with an actual ending fund balance. And so we like to adjust the 2019 beginning fund balance to that actual so that it actually ties. Sometimes there's variances, and it's better to work off what the actual number is, increased or decreased, versus what the planned number is. And it just gives us a better data point. So in the general fund, there was a decrease of $328,000. Some of that is due to the early transfer of some of the capital money out of the general fund into the capital fund, and so that just decreased that a little bit. I'll come wrap back to that in just a few minutes, though. We had the donations for the K-9 program that came in, and also the sale of some old police cars. Those are both one-time funding sources. The adjustment to the interfund revenue for the final model updates, we did adopt and have the indirect cost model as part of the 2019 adopted budget. And that was down to the wire, as many of you remember, of trying to get that model all finalized and many adjustments made to it. And after that was done, we looped back with the consultant and kind of stepped through it with an even finer tooth comb to look through it, and noticed a few things that were just a little, needed some adjustment still, and made some other adjustments for the allocation data. And so this just updates then the revenue into the general fund from the paying fund. So that would be the internal service funds, the utility funds, and the street fund. Those all pay into the general fund for the indirect cost services. And so this is just an update to the several line items that are included. So personnel services, finance services, legal, executive, and such. So those will be ongoing adjustments too from a revenue standpoint. And then the last two in there are moving interfund revenue from street fund. So there was some, when we tried to slice off the revenue that was that was in the general fund but related to street operations, and we kind of said, okay, these are all street related, like the gas tax, that was obviously directly related. There was a few interfund ones that we moved over that were listed as interfund, and then further conversation with Craig and with Terry realized that those were actually belonged to, they were engineering services. So it was the like capital fund or the utility funds paying back the general fund for engineering, which that's not necessarily street related directly because it's capital projects. So we are kind of moving the revenue back to the general fund, and you'll see an increase then on the expenditure side, the second to last item of 116,000, direct match to that. Because we took that revenue out of the street fund, we're going to increase the sub-transfer of the subsidy. So it ends up being a wash. The revenue comes in, but then more will go out. The street fund stays the same, and it's just moving the pieces of the puzzle back and forth of how we're subsidizing and funding the street fund. On the expenditure side, there will be an item for any fund that has personnel. The first two lines, salary changes and benefit changes. These are mostly related to, again, the bargaining unit contracts that were approved after the budget for Public Works and Finance. So Finance mostly obviously hits the general fund, and Public Works mostly hits the street and utility funds, and the internal service fund for equipment rental. And then also, when we did the budget in the fall, we had several vacancies, many in key leadership positions. Those have mostly all been filled now. And when we budget conservatively at a higher salary and a full family demographic of benefits, not knowing who will be taking that position. And there's a large difference between an employee coming in and only having employee-only medical and dental and health vision benefits versus a full family. It can swing, anywhere up to $15,000 just on that. So we always budget conservatively because we don't want to be under budgeted. So this is recognizing the people that have come into those positions and making those adjustments for the salary and benefits as well. So the first two lines overall, there's actually a decrease in the general fund for salary and benefits based on the adjustments to all of those items. The third line down, new position for HR and risk management. So this was a new HR analyst type position that is being requested to be then included for that department. There'll be the payroll functioning, moving from finance over to that. The 99,000 that's listed is both the salary and the benefits for that position. And because of that, there will be an offset to, there's an offset to a position that was doing the payroll in finance. That will be kind of reclassed to a lower level position since it won't be doing the payroll. So there's an offset of that 99,000 at 13,000. Then there's a couple carryovers for contracts that were not completed and will be carrying over, finishing those, the retail coach and the FCS group contract. There's the two transfers that Aaron spoke to about going out to streets. So you have the working capital. The street fund has to have some working capital, like all funds do, related to the fact that your expenditures will happen fairly steadily each month, especially if there's personnel involved, but your revenues may not come in evenly. Sometimes revenues are distributed quarterly from the state, and otherwise, or they're seasonal. So each fund has to have a working capital balance. And so The street fund, or the general fund then transferred 200,000 to the street fund to create that working capital, as well as the balance of the Transportation Benefit District funds of 590,000. You'll see some offsets to the revenue came in for things in police, such as the purchase of the K-9 program dog and the police cars, and those have the offsetting one-time revenue. And that takes us to the street fund. A few of these relate to the things that we saw in the general fund as far as revenue moving back and the transfers coming in. There was a grant from WCIA to recognize, and that money is going to go to help work, do concrete panel work. And then again, salary and benefit changes. Not too many changes in some of the other special revenue funds. The tourism fund, just adjusting beginning fund balances, as well as in the bond fund, adjusting beginning fund balance up for both of those. The capital fund, you'll see an adjustment to the beginning fund balance that's much lower. Again, that relates to the fact that we were expecting grant revenues to come in. So when we did that estimate in 2018, we were expecting a lot of grant revenue to come in for projects that had happened last year. Timing from the granting agencies didn't send us those reimbursements until January of this year. So the beginning fund balance decreases, but then we're recognizing the revenue that did come in to offset that, as well as then carrying over some of the construction costs that were getting funded from that. In the water fund, again, adjusting the beginning fund balance and then recognizing an increase in interest revenue. Some of the interest revenue accounts taken off of historical numbers were budgeted at pretty low. When Terry and I went through and looked at that and looked at how much we are investing in the different areas, such as LGIP, and how much each fund is contributing, we had to make some adjustments so that just to recognize such things as the water and the sewer fund and stuff, how much they're actually receiving as part of that interest allocation. From an expenditure side, salary and benefit changes again, and then carryover for our well one rehab design, and there was a survey done related to the tiny homes project that we hadn't anticipated initially. The sewer fund, large decrease in the beginning fund balance, and that's related to the Basin 3 grant that we didn't receive timing-wise again until January or February. And then that will also then carry over on the construction side. Solid waste just had a reduction in beginning fund balance. Storm drainage, increase of revenue, salary and benefit changes from an expenditure side, and that was all there. The payroll and benefits fund, just a beginning fund balance adjustment. EM&R, again, just in beginning fund balance and interest revenue as well as salaries. And then fireman pension and library endowment, just the beginning fund balance changes. So one thing I just wanted to loop back and mention as far as the general fund, the decrease in the beginning fund balance for the general fund, mostly because of that timing of sending some of the capital money early at the end of 2018. That means our budgeted amount that we have that we were planning on transferring out in 2019, we will do less of a transfer. So we will underspend on the budget side, and then we received less on the revenue. So overall, if we had not done the transfers early, the general fund balance would have started 275,000 increase. So we don't really have a decrease in the general fund beginning fund balance. It was more of a timing issue, and will come out when we spend less on the other end. So overall, the position of the general fund at this point of the year, as Aaron mentioned, it's pretty early because of seasonality of revenues and expenses, but looking at the general fund overall is doing quite well. And any of the ongoing expenditure items that weren't directly offset from a revenue are within the capacity of the general fund to continue. I'd be happy to answer any questions that
You
council
said
might have.
something about tiny homes.
Just there was a survey that we hadn't planned for that was part of the water department.
Okay.
$5,500. Any other questions from council?
Question on the general fund, the adjustment of the interfund revenue for the final model updates.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably will see that consistently in the budget updates if the model is.
The model is done now. We had some, we realized that there was a little bit of confusion on the facilities maintenance piece of the prior model that had been done many, many years ago was based on from a square footage standpoint to allocate those indirect costs. And it was not updated satisfactorily to how the expenses of the services were being planned. So we just had to adjust that, and then that adjusted some of the allocations to the departments. So these numbers then will adjust the revenue in the general fund to the final amounts. We won't have any other adjustments for the rest of this year.
Ongoing.
The model, ongoing. The model will be updated again this summer for the 2020 budget, and those data points will be, adjusted as necessary.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Anything else for Sandy?
I just have one comment.
Go ahead.
I want to thank Aaron coming in and reining in the wild horse, getting it under control, and Sandy for coming in before he did to prepare the path for him. And the finance department, I want to thank you very much for all your hard work. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you, oh, sorry, Gary. Yeah, I can't speak for these people, but I think pretty much agree that, it was just a little over a year ago, we were a mess. And we were talking about laying people off and cutting it was nerve-wracking. And the work that you've done, and now Aaron and Terry, is she still here?
Terry's over.
It's kind of just made me feel a lot more calm about things, and I just want to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Very much.
Councilmember Franz?
I do want to, this is a department that I am extremely, has been on my mind for like 12 years. The city's finances and what we've done and how we've done it. And it's a team thing. It's all departments. But this, I am very happy with where we are with this group and Aaron and with our new city manager, and where we are finding a real common stability and a common sense approach to so much. And, just not 1 year ago, but like maybe 3 years ago, I was told by a high-ranking official that we literally were on the edge of bankruptcy. Now, I'm just telling you, it feels real good to be in a ship that's not sinking. So thank you for your effort, and let's all continue on to make, Shelton fiscally prudent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anything else? All right.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Sandy. Okay, Donna, could you read ordinance number 1938-0519?
Yes. Ordinance number 1938-0519, an ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, amending the annual budget for the year ending December 31st, 2019.
Okay, any further comments? We all agree to move that forward to the action agenda for next meeting? All right. Thank you, everyone, for all your hard work. Okay, next item, we're going to recess out of our normal meeting to start a public hearing updating the Shelton Municipal Code for flood damage prevention. And I'll turn it over to Senior Planner Jason Dose.
Thank you, Mayor Rogers, member of the council. We are here to consider an update to our flood damage prevention regulations, and also adopt the newly finalized FEMA floodplain maps. To give you a little, context and history into the National Flood Insurance Program, that's basically what we're talking about. Prior to the program's enactment in the late 1960s, the way we approached floodplain development and flood protection in the U.S. as a nation was largely to engineer around things. We're man, we can defeat nature. So we built levees, we built things like right here in our own town, the Shelton Creek diversion. Behind the library, we have that big pond that actually diverts high flows from Shelton Creek over to Goldsboro Creek because it would flood downstream. As we've seen with many recent storm events, be it in Texas, in the Midwest, in New Orleans, sometimes these engineering practices are a little bit imperfect. We don't gauge the storms correctly. They overtop levees. They can overwhelm pumps. basically creating a situation where by design, up until 1968, what we did was actually encourage poor development, meaning you have a levee behind a river. The river rises and might overtop the levee. Well, there's a bunch of homes built down here that aren't raised above what would be your natural floodplain. So 1968, after the federal government struggles with all these national emergencies, buying people out, rebuilding their homes, they decided to enact the National Flood Insurance Program. The city of Shelton in particular has been a member of the program since our first flood hazard maps, they called them at the time, were developed in the early 1970s, and we adopted our first flood damage prevention ordinance very shortly thereafter. Those initial maps just very generally kind of said, hey, you flood over here, so try not to build structures that are going to flood. There wasn't a lot of specificity to it, in a nutshell. So in 1983, our first real flood insurance rate map was developed. And believe it or not, that's still in effect today, the very same map. That map was developed based on some old topographic maps. You've probably seen those quadrangles we all saw in school, and we still have a few hanging in the office. We developed some updated flood regulations at that time and shortly thereafter. And essentially, those regulations stay the same. What they say is these studies and these maps that the feds have given to us, that any new development we have, there's a certain flood level that in a perfect storm, I should back up a little bit. In a perfect storm, what does Shelton's, or an imperfect storm, I guess is a better way of putting it, what does Shelton's flooding look like? We have king tides. You've all heard of that. The tides during certain times of the year will get extremely high, much higher than normal, by a couple feet in some places. We can also have very prolonged rainfall. There's a surprise to everyone in the room. If you have the worst case scenario where you have a king tide, prolonged rainfall for weeks, it can create a situation where you've got high water out in the bay, backing up water in Goldsboro Creek. You've got water coming down from the hillsides, and it has nowhere to go. So what does it do? It backs up out of the creek and kind of lays out through primarily our downtown. That's our biggest concern in town, is the area from Oakland Bay to approximately plus or minus 3rd Street, if you look at the map you have included in your packet. So those old maps identified the flood levels because, thankfully, we live in an area where we have ample fish, we have shell fishing, so what's tracked very well in this area? The tides for shell fishing and stream flows for fisheries. So we have decades of stream flow information to draw upon, or the feds do. I say the proverbial we. We have decades of stream flow information, decades of tidal information, and now with these updated maps, what they have is real-time, basically photographs, radar images of what the actual topography is, even under structures. So what you see in this updated map is within a foot, what I'm told, based on the imagery that the federal government is able to use, within a foot, they have mapped the extent based on these studies they've done for the imperfect storm, I'll call it. And they no longer call the floodplain the 100-year floodplain. I should back up a little bit. It's now considered a storm that has a 1% chance of happening in any given year. Because the first thing people will say, and I hear it all the time as a land use planner, USGS will release the stream flows for Goldsboro Creek or whatever, the Skokomish River, and they're like, well, wow, we just had another 100-year event, right? Because it's a 100-year flow. Well, that's happened 9 times in the last 20 years. How is that a 100-year event? So they've changed it, meaning you could literally have one of these events every single year if the imperfect storm occurred all the time. So they're calling it the 1% chance of flood. So the blue shaded area on this map is the 1% chance of flood. And the way the NFIP works, the National Flood Insurance Program works, is when we're told, as the local jurisdiction, we're told you have these flood hazards in your community. We are, availed the National Flood Insurance Program. What that means is property owners within those areas can avail themselves of federally backed loans, mortgages. We can avail ourselves to federal dollars for grants for different types of improvements, as long as we adopt regulations that are at least the minimum required by the federal government. Does that make sense? And throughout Shelton's history, we have adopted the minimum standard. They give us what is called a model ordinance. And FEMA Region 10, which our region, including Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and I think Northern California, we're all in FEMA Region 10. They have a Puget Sound model ordinance that back in 2016, when FEMA released these draft maps, they, met with all the local jurisdictions and said, you guys need to review these maps. We're going to go through a public process, which they did, and I can give you more information on that to see if, there's any disputes or any challenges to these maps, which, by the way, there were none filed in our area. So our map stayed identical to what was the initially proposed map. But not only local jurisdiction, do you have to adopt these updated maps within 6 months of when we tell you they're finalized, you also have to update your regulations to the current standard. So what I did at that time was try to get somebody at FEMA to work with me, review our ordinance, let me know what you think. It took a lot longer than expected to get that, but I got feedback on our ordinance based on the model ordinance, and essentially the strikeout and underline version you have before you is the minimum. This is almost verbatim, and I say almost because I took a little bit of artistic liberty to change the wording a little bit in certain places so you didn't just have a sea of strikeout and, all underline, all new text. They basically, and FEMA agreed, they say the same thing, it just isn't the exact same wording in a couple of instances. But by and large, this is the minimum required if we're to remain in the National Flood Insurance Program. So FEMA's process they went to. So I guess, where most people were interested was not so much in the regulations, because the meat of these regulations did not change demonstratively. If you build a new residential structure, you're required to build that structure at least 1 foot. The finished floor has to be at least 1 foot above the identified floodplain. So that gets established by a surveyor on your site. So they look at the flood map, they read the data, and they say, oh, the flood level is 22.3 feet at your site. They gauge that based on ground level, and you have to put your floor level up here, at least 1 foot above. We clear on that? Commercial structures can do one of two things: elevate their structure 1 foot above the flood level, or they can flood-proof their structure. And there's a legal definition of flood-proofing, which is included in our ordinance. And most people end up elevating because flood-proofing, of course, offers challenges. For example, you have to be able to get in and out of your structure. So it's difficult sometimes to flood-proof garage doors and doorways and provide ADA access to a structure that's essentially a moat. But that is an option, not for residential structures, though. So FEMA released these maps, reviewed our regulations. The appeal period for the maps themselves, I believe, closed sometime last summer, and I believe Mayor Rogers has received the same letters I've been receiving. They notified us in December of 2018 that we have 6 months to adopt these maps and update our regulations to the minimum standard. And that is, I believe, June 20th. Once we got that notice, oh, hey, you're releasing the final maps. Of course, I'm concerned a little bit because I still haven't heard back on our ordinance. So I start pressing some FEMA people I know, and they did finally get back to me, I believe, in about March with, here are the changes you're required to do. I reviewed them. My opinion is none of the changes substantially change anything we deal with on a daily basis. The one thing I will say is we were able to add the legal definition of what constitutes a historic structure. And the only reason I say this is we were able to provide a local business proponent a little bit of reprieve on what he would otherwise have to do, because the definition of a historic structure we had in the ordinance did not meet the federal requirement, and it didn't pull in clearly locally designated historic structures. I went back to the federal regulations, argued to the FEMA folks, hey, this should qualify as a historic structure because your regulations say it, even if my own ordinance doesn't, and you're kind of like Big Brother, to invoke, an Orwellian metaphor there. They agreed. So anyway, now it's clear. I don't have to connect the dots and make an argument. It's right there in our ordinance. So I mean, there's certainly a positive to updating to the current definitions and such. So that said, at a staff level, we're certainly recommending approval, so the city remains in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, and we can enjoy its benefits, I suppose.
So you talk about historical structures.
Mhm.
So if someone has one, what does that do with the insurance or the flood insurance?
Excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. So as it relates to historic structures, of course, to back up, what makes a structure historic? I mean, for one, you would have to petition to the local historic board to have your structure placed on the register. And they review it for its structural integrity, its historic significance, either architectural or design, or if a historic figure lived there, like David Shelton or something. And they, can choose to place it on the register or not place it on the register. Well, like I said, there's design elements that are very important to retain its historic character. So the variance you get is from, like, the elevation, which can change the historic nature of a structure. If you took the Green Diamond mansion over there off of, right by the courthouse, and let's say it were in the flood zone, and you had to lift it 4 feet, well, that would, A, it'd be difficult, but B, it would drastically change the look of it, and that's a big part of the historic nature of structures. So to answer the question, it can allow them reprieve, like it's not in the flood zone, but let's say it were, to use that as an example. They can be in non-compliance with the federal standards, and we will not be dinged, I'll put aerial quotes around that, by FEMA officials when they come review our files, and they do that. About every 8 to 10 years, they do what's called a compliance visit. They drive around our flood zone. I mean, this is honestly how it happens. They drive around our flood zone, look at structures that appear they've been improved, and they want to see, hey, can I see the file for, the Green Diamond Mansion? Can I see the file for the Grove Street Brew Pub? And they look, did you follow the city's code, but basically the federal minimum standards? What it does not do is absolve you from paying increased flood insurance rates, because your structure is not in fact protected. So you may not have to do the physical improvements. It might allow you to, in an easier fashion on the ground, to do your use or achieve your end goal, but your flood insurance rates are still going to be higher because it's not, does that make sense? It's not protected from flood damage.
No, my house is on the register, and it's just like a hair from the flood zone there, which is down at the end of Fifth Street.
If I can jump in there, you're closer to what's considered the 0.02%,
Right.
what's formally known as the 500-year flood.
Right.
We're not required to regulate that to that. It's strictly to the 1%, or the 100-year, as it's more commonly called. And that is the only people that have to really think about, or the only entities, rather, not people, although we are people too, are essential public facilities. So like government offices, fire stations, police stations, airports, they're required to regulate to the 500-year, but everybody else is held to the 100.
And to be clear, this comes into effect under new construction or substantial renovation.
Right.
So an existing structure,
Right.
we wouldn't review
Yeah.
for flood proofing or base flood elevation.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Councilmember
Well,
Brown.
just as a side note, I went into Jeff and we had a long talk about how this all affects. And in your wording on here, it was kind of cute, you had on here, it says, now the city council may either adopt this flood plan maps or flood damage prevention regulation, or it may opt out of the National Flood Insurance Program. So in reality, you should have said, you got no choice, guys.
You've keyed into a sticky point with me. I was the guy in the room when FEMA came to town, so to speak, years back, notifying us that we were, they were releasing these maps, and here's the process you're going to have to go through as a local government. I raised my hand right up. I said, it honestly doesn't sound like we have a choice. I go, why do we adopt this locally? Why don't you just hand it to us and say, hey, do this? Because absolutely, that's the choice. Comply, or you're out of the program.
Right, and again, just to clarify, I have a piece of property that it appears the red or the orange line comes exactly to my fence. I looked at it with my glasses off, and and that little red line comes right to my fence. But you're talking about the blue, isn't
Yes.
the blue? The blue is your 100-year.
Absolutely.
The red is the 500-year.
Yeah, and the last.
Not that I'm against having it in there.
The last, what I'll call event that I'm aware of anyway, that came anywhere near being the 100-year, which it wasn't. It had flows in the creek of a 1% or 100-year event, but we didn't see the king tides coincide. We didn't have the saturation levels, so we had fairly minor flooding. But interestingly enough, in those areas you're talking about, south of Park Street, we actually have photographs from when Goldsboro Creek overtopped its banks, eddied around the south side of Park Street, and I think the water must have been maybe that deep, but still, that's considered a flood, that's on this property. And I was rolling around with a staff member at the time, and he was taking photos, and I kind of sarcastically stated, hey, that's not in the flood zone, because that's an area south of Park Street that wasn't identified in the old maps that are less perfect for elevations. And honestly, from what I'm seeing in this map, that's absolutely exactly where we saw water in that event. So it's uncanny how accurate this can be.
Okay, I just have a quick question. So if you're on Railroad and you have an old building and a vacant lot and an old building, I mean, for new construction, we would ask them to elevate that up. That'd look kind of funny down on the Railroad. We have a lot down there that.
There's a variance procedure, and it's reworded a little bit to come, because of course, as you can imagine, as time goes on, there's more litigation over variances and stuff. The wording's changed a little bit to comply with the new minimum standard. There is a variance process for not complying in situations where you've got smaller lots with adjacent development. The code is clear, you shouldn't just give these out willy-nilly. I mean, there's a lot of verbiage in there. You've got to really have a reason for the variance, but that's one of them, certainly. But it's also very clear that that property owner, you know, we're required to notify them, so they go in eyes open, so to speak. Okay, we can approve this variance in theory, but you're still going to pay higher flood insurance premiums because you're constructing this new building not meeting the flood zone. So yes, it's an option, but there are trade-offs with that.
I just thought it would look funny.
And the intent isn't that we just give variance after variance after variance. I mean, that's also clear in the language, you know, I realize I'm dancing all over what you just said, but that's the nature of these things. Over time, the intent of the regulations is to get compliance.
Another curiosity question. So on a new construction for a home, in the flood zone, and they build it up, do they still pay flood insurance?
They do, but my understanding is it's at a greatly reduced rate, because now you have a situation where in the flood regulations look at everything. They look at mechanical equipment, they look at electrical, I mean, you want to raise everything up. So some of the pictures you can see, if you want to really have an exciting afternoon, you can read through my stuff here. I have a lot of documents from FEMA where a structure might be built up to the right level, but then they install their ground-mounted HVAC system below it. And now in a flood situation, their entire HVAC system's kind of trashed, including ducting, because it wasn't looked at. They looked at the structure itself. So the codes are required to be more clearer now. You raise all ancillary equipment too. But yes, they do get raised up.
Anything else? I had a question. You mentioned that small lot. Looked like there was more of a variance for half acre and smaller lots in the existing code versus the revised code. Is that, and that you mentioned that?
It's still in there now.
It's still in there. It's just probably harder to.
The bigger the lot gets, the higher the bar for the variance is, and that's not exactly how it's worded, but that's basically some of the language that we had to add. You know, because they were seeing some communities, not us, that were just giving variance after variance after variance after variance and kind of justifying it based on the previous variance. Well, we gave that one, so we're going to give this one. Oh, we gave that one. And 10 years down the line, you've got 18 structures built not to code.
I have one other question, and it appears that the existing code has a city council as more of the appeals process, and the new code has the hearing examiner, which seems consistent with other cities that I looked at. So is that a fair statement?
That is, it's the direction we've gone with, even before the council. A lot of the city's land use processes had the council, when I first started, or the commission, I'm sorry, at the time, as the appeal body when I first started working here, and it was just, it's a much more clean process when you have a land use attorney as the initial appeal period. The hearings examiner's decision is appealable to the council. I mean, so you can go that extra step, but you're not, basically, this would be the end result body. And it kind of limits, in situations, especially, not that we have many appeals. Honestly, I don't believe we've had an appeal since I've been here 12 years, never had an appeal of a decision, knock on wood. But it offers a little more reprieve for both sides, because, as you grow as a city, you get more contentious projects, and you want to have an outlet for people to be heard, and it just seemed, the way we had it set up, it was kind of limiting.
Okay. Anything else? Was there anyone for public comment on that?
No, there isn't.
Okay. So I'll ask for the first reading, ordinance number 1937-0519.
Ordinance number 1937-0519, an ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, amending Chapter 18.10 of the Shelton Municipal Code related to flood damage prevention.
Okay, and council concurs to move this forward to the action for June 4th?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we'll move it forward, close the public hearing, and resume our regular meeting. Our next item, City Manager Jeff Knight, information about interlocal agreement with PRTPO.
Thank you for saying that acronym. I won't try. I mess that up every time. The new interlocal agreement that you have before you this evening for the Transportation Planning Organization, the original agreement's been in effect since 1990, and the agreement is intended, this new agreement rather, is intended to reflect several changes that have occurred within the organization over the past 30 years or so. The new agreement reflects the current statutory and regulatory changes that have happened over the last 30 years. But the main thing was that the leadership of the group has been done by WSDOT since its inception. And that leadership now will be handled by Kitsap County's Transportation Planning Organization. It's that change doesn't mean a whole lot for us. It's just a matter of how the program is administered. We do have a couple other things. There's some clarity in the language that as you continue moving forward throughout the life cycle of an agreement, some things come to light that you want to clarify, reporting procedures and things like that. That's reflected in the new agreement. And also a member of our council, currently Deputy Mayor Peterson, is part of the board for
PRTPO.
PRPTO there. And then also a member of our public works staff, either Director Gregory or someone that he delegates to, will be a member of the technical advisory committee for the organization. So we are fully involved in that process and will continue to be even with the new interlocal agreement. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for City Manager? Is there any time issue with this? I know you.
There is, and we verified that if we have the first reading tonight and council desires to move this forward to second reading on June 4th, that will meet the timelines established by the organization.
Thanks. All right, so we concur to move this forward to the action agenda for June 4th?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thanks. Okay, moving on to tonight's action agenda. Anyone sign up for public comment?
No, I do not have anyone.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Our first and only action agenda is for Mark Ziegler regarding repairs to the community, excuse me, to the library.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No problem at all. Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm pleased to bring you the first phase of getting some repairs done at the William G. Reed Library done tonight by presenting to you a contract with NC Structures LLC for roof repairs. The city staff recently opened bids on May 2nd. We received 2 bids from contractors to do several projects that were broken out because we weren't quite sure how those bidding costs would, our proposals would come in. So we had a base bid for a standing seam metal roof. Alternate bid 1 was siding repair and painting of the structure. Alternate 2 was repair of the south deck, including a new impervious membrane, new railing, replacing some fascia and deck boards and that materials. Alternate 3 was repairing the east and west decks, their staff entrances and exits. And then alternate 4 was a deduction, actually, a deductive alternate that would replace the, in lieu of the metal roof, a composition roof. So after opening those bids, there was certainly one bid in the alternate 1 that we thought was quite favorable to the city, and it was for that reason, it was favorable, but it was a mistake made by that contractor. And in realizing that, we decided to move forward with a only awarding the base bid, and then that's really the priority at this point, is repairing the roof and replacing the roof to help seal in that envelope, and then move forward with another bid opening, an advertisement for the painting and siding repairs through our small works roster to hopefully get a more favorable bid and one that's more clear here in the next few weeks, and we're working on that as we speak. So at this time, again, recommending to the council that you sign the, make sure I have it right, project award form and the contract with NC Structures in the amount of $186,095.87 for the roof repairs. In doing so, per the bid documents, we still have 45 days to award the alternate bids. So we will have that painting and siding bid within that time frame. If it comes in a favorable price, we could still award some repairs for the other alternates, which were the south deck and the east and west deck as well.
So the roof is going to be metal, or it's going to be metal, so we're going with that?
At this point, yes.
Okay.
Unless things really change with that painting and siding repair,
Yeah.
we still could award the deductive alternate as well. So we're kind of keeping that as an opportunity, but we do need to start the contract award process for the bids, because the bids would expire within 45 days from award. So we'd like to get that moving, at least so we don't miss out on this construction window.
So are these bids within Mason County? I mean,
Are the
businesses,
contractors Mason County? The second bid, I believe, was a local contractor, Triple C Fabrication.
Other questions for Mark?
Well, just a little lesson, having been a ex-builder my entire life, probably would have been nice for us to put a metal roof on this 25 years ago.
There is a metal roof on it.
There is a metal roof
Oh,
on
there
it.
is?
Unfortunately, there is.
Probably would have been nice for us to put a good metal roof on.
It probably would have been nice for that metal roof to be installed correctly.
Oh.
I think
That would have been
is the
nice.
key.
Okay, that's all I had to say.
Yes. Yeah,
And they're saying, what, 50 years out of that
Yeah.
metal roof?
yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly you have the benefit of the metal roof over the comp, and that would be preferred. We do have funding through a state appropriation through the Department of Commerce, so we have some limitations on what's available. And we have those priorities, those projects. It'd be really nice to obviously get the building painted as well. So if that means that we have to go to a comp roof and it's a 25 or 30-year roof, that may be necessary, and that will come back to the council for a contract amendment at that point. And I'll have a recommendation, and you can review it then.
Question or comment. I know we own the building. Have we had communication through this process with Timberland, just kind of keep them up to speed on
Yeah.
where we're at on this?
With our local librarian, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move to award the William G. Reed Library repairs contract to NC Structures LLC by authorizing each member of the council to sign the project award form, and further authorizing the mayor to sign the William G. Reed Library repairs contract once it has been signed by NC Structures LLC.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second, to award William G. Reed Library Repairs Contract NC Structures LLC by authorizing each member of the council to sign the project award form and further authorizing me to sign the William G. Reed Library Repairs Contract once it has been signed by NC Structures LLC. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Anyone left for
No, I don't
final
have any
public
more.
comment? All right, thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Knighton, are you ready for city manager's report?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, staff, members of the public. Couple things I wanted to mention tonight before I'll turn it over to Director Gregory for a short update on the Downtown Connector project. First, there is an invitation for all of the council, myself, and any members of the public that would like to go on Friday, May 24th at 11:30 at the PUD for Congressman Kilmer to announce the Broadband for All project. And I will be attending, and if council would like to attend, please let me know, and we'll make sure there's no more than 4 of you.
There's, that's this Friday?
Yes,
At what time?
11:30. And other than that, Thursday, the Washington State Correction Center kindly invited me out to speak to the corrections officers to honor those officers for Correctional Officers Week. So I'll be doing that Thursday afternoon. Have a good time. I hope the food's good, but we will find out. And after that, we'll turn it over to Director Gregory to update us on Downtown Connector.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Just a real quick update on Downtown Connector. We have run into a few issues recently, and one further back, but before we get closer to finishing this project up, so it's no surprise. I think you're all aware, we've made it fully clear that there was no minor change within this project. It's not allowed through Transportation Improvement Board. So what we had for, like in Basin 3, we had a contingency in Schedule A of $250,000 for minor change. This project, anything that was cost overruns would be an overage not absorbed by a minor change. So couple of just the highlights that we have had, the corrugated metal pipe, storm pipe, going from 7th Street all the way basically to the top of the hill at C Street. Early on in the project, we found that the majority of that corrugated trunk line, which basically drains all of Mountain View to downtown, had no bottom in it. It was directly under the multi-use path that is there or was there before and failing, and the new one that is there now. The total cost for that was just over $141,000 to replace that storm pipe. Some of the smaller ones, most recently that have happened, we had some overtime to get the pavement down back in early April to get that roadway back open. We ran into some issues with the box culvert down between 2nd and 3rd Street and getting a sidewalk over the top of the creek there that comes down through and crosses across Alder Street. That we had to do some engineering on and revamp to get the actual sidewalk over that box culvert. And most recently, when we opened up the intersection of 1st and Alder Street, we found a few problems. One in particular, we had ran into a wooden roadway that passed through that intersection that we ended up having to pull up. It was made out of timbers set in the ground, and then cross members across that under the what was the foot-thick concrete panels that were down there that we had to remove all of that out of that entire section of the project. And then when we did open that up, what we found was a lot of groundwater. Groundwater came up to within about a foot of the top of the subgrade material. We ended up having to over-excavate that entire intersection, ended up importing just under 1,100 tons of material from quarry spalls to city road ballast and ultimately crushed surfacing top course. Total change there ended up being about $110,000. But the good thing is, right now, where we sit, projecting forward and looking at the overall cost of this project, if we look at the funding, had just short of $3.5 million from Transportation Improvement Board, the $1 million grant direct appropriation, and then another $96,000 that came from Mason Transit Authority for the bus pull-off and the shelter, bringing the total to $4.585 million. And right now, what we're projecting is to be over budget just under 4%, or about $170,000 at the end of the project. So all in all, without having a minor change being over less than 4%, I think right now is a success to this project. But we just wanted to make you aware of kind of where we were at, getting towards the end of this, and looking at paving here sometime in late June. So that is where we sit. Be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Where was the wood roadway?
It was basically right in front of Subway. Doc Blevins, the chiropractor there, ran north and south up and down First Street.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing.
I'm surprised that wasn't on one of your maps.
An old, that old of a roadway. I'm guessing, and really probably should have took the hint when we looked at that intersection and it was a foot thick concrete. We probably should have taken a hint there that there was something underneath it. Probably that wasn't great.
Kind of odd that they didn't tear it out when they did the concrete.
Yeah.
Did you get pictures?
We have a few pictures, not very many, but a few.
Do you think, I know it's your opinion, that we're through any more high-risk excavations or anything like that? It seems like at this point, we're at the surface, right?
Yeah,
On almost everything.
we're pretty much there. The only thing really that could come up now is I don't foresee any cost overruns with HMA over that entire, I mean, we've got a pretty good base lift on it and we should know quantities, but that's really the last big ticket item that we have left. They've constructed already most of the center splitter islands, the curbing for the center traffic circle, but yeah, really nothing else that I foresee that could jump up and bite us at this point. Okay.
I want to thank you for filling in the road, the waiting down here by the library and up at the top of the hill where it was a bump.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We heard quite a few complaints on
I
that.
started going out Road to get
Yeah.
up to Mountain View
Yeah.
because
So,
thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Just two questions. So one, I believe you've told us before, but just to clarify, we are recording all of these as-built and odd things in terms of where the creek's falling and where things maybe didn't match our maps before, so that next time we have a project, the person standing in your shoes has a bit of a better position.
Yes, absolutely.
And the second question is, do we have an updated estimate as to when Northcliffe will open? Or at this time, when do we estimate that to reopen? Because the city website still just says end of May.
I'm a little hesitant to answer that one. I will give you right now my best guess, but my best guess has been wrong most of the time through this project, especially Basin 3. Right now, they have ground Northcliffe. They did that on Monday, and they've started the trench repair, and right now they are scheduled to pave on the 29th and 30th and have Northcliffe open by the 31st, Friday the 31st. That is the tentative schedule at this point.
Thank you.
Whether they will be able to stick by that with the trench repairs, I'm not sure, but right now, that's the tentative schedule. They've got granite construction scheduled to come in and pave on the 29th and 30th.
Thank you.
But not the roundabout. That won't be done.
Downtown Connector is a little further off, a little ahead of schedule than what we were first projected, but yeah, that's still a little up in the air with weather and concrete work and things like that, but that's looking like it's sometime mid to late June is what we're looking at
Northcliffe
for
is open,
final.
how are they getting up with that roundabout work?
Well,
If
sorry.
Northcliffe is opened and the roundabout's not done, how are they getting up there to begin with?
We've got a detour route set up, access to all the businesses down in that area. Basically, it's routed around through Franklin Street, down to Fourth, and then Fourth to Birch, back to Capitol Hill, San Joaquin, and then up the hill, Northcliffe, which also leaves access to businesses, Mickey's Deli, that complex down in that area, via Birch Street and Second. So that has been set up the entire time.
Yeah, I'll just mention, I've been to several businesses down there, and you can get to them, and I encourage people to do it. It's kind of out of the way, but it's not super difficult, so
Yeah,
please.
we have been doing the same, encouraging everybody to support local businesses, especially the ones that are affected by the projects.
Craig, I just had a thought about the car show coming up there on Mountain View. The traffic won't be able to go up Mountain View. I mean, unless you have a detour for them.
We always
around
detour
that.
the, yeah, we always
So
detour
you
the
can
same
still go
way.
up to like what, C Street, take a right?
C Street, and that's where it's always detoured, and
left.
it's detoured to your west,
Yeah.
to Adams Street,
Okay.
and also to your east down Jefferson.
I
So
was just-
that's been the normal
Yeah,
detour.
it's been detoured like that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking with Northcliffe closed and not being able to get through, that would be a.
Those through streets, north and south, are pretty accessible and pretty wide, so we haven't had any issues in the past. But we're keeping our fingers crossed that Northcliffe is open at that point.
It's gonna be
also.
close, isn't it? Yeah.
It's going to be close, yes. But we're pushing them as hard as we can push them at this point.
Anything else for Craig on connector? Can I ask one question on Basin 3?
Sure.
The add-on, is been any surprises on that? Are we pretty much as planned on the add-on work?
Well, we're in design right now. So we haven't started any kind of construction. That probably won't start until sometime in late June, I would guess.
Okay.
We've got quite a bit of work to do down there, moving some utilities, water services that need to go into the sidewalk. PUD's got quite a few poles that they're going to need to move also. I guess one point that we've been getting quite a few calls that landscaping in the right-of-way, and folks a little uncomfortable with us removing what was landscaping that was put into the right-of-way without a right-of-way permit and is on city property. But we've been hearing quite a bit of complaints about those things, so just something to be aware of. There is quite a bit of that down in that area of some older homes that have planted everything from fruit trees to decorative trees to grass and electrical power out into that area. So, yeah, we've heard some about that, but we've been advising everybody that if you want to try to move landscaping, now's the time to do it. So get out and try and take care of it now.
That's on Birch Street, right?
Well, it's Birch, Laurel. It's
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
all of
yeah.
north downtown Shelton, north of Alder Street.
Yep.
From First to 8th. So it's that entire section down there.
Some
Other-
beautiful trees down in that area.
Yeah, and we've had other questions of where are you gonna put the mailboxes, things like that. Because a lot of them right now are just stuck in the parking strip, so we're looking at clustered mailboxes on actual, city design standard, mailbox, groupings. Some of them that will go in the alley, others at the end of the blocks. But yeah, we are likely not going to be able to just have scattered mailboxes
For those
right in front of residents, so.
Yeah. Well, the clustered mailboxes, who's going to be paying for those?
The city will, through the project. That'll be
Okay.
something that the city incurs the cost of putting those mailbox holders in.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Craig.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, sir.
Okay, anything else from the council tonight? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is June 4th.
Kevin. Knock on wood. All right.